Here we are again. It feels like the fastest hour and a half I've ever spent. It was in that last was in that live thing we just did, and I really, really appreciated, enjoyed every minute of it. What I found is that I had like about 20 questions left at the end of it, and I thought I would just run through some of them, not all of them, for a variety of reasons. I mean, some of the reasons are that some of them actually will produce a whole show on their own. But one reason I wanted to do it is just because a lot of names came up, you guys' names, and I wanted to make sure you were noticed. But primarily actually because they were part of what would have been, sort of quick answers, could have been relatively quick replies that didn't require full videos. So, and this thing wouldn't work if we did have to do full videos. Um, but So I'm going to give this a shot to just doing this and not waste a lot of time here at the beginning chatting, except for one thing, and that is I want to thank Theodora, who's, I think, put yourself on a payment schedule to us, which I'm really grateful for. I know it's not the first time you've donated, so I really do appreciate that, Theodora. And then Darian, um, that some of us know as Parting Mist. Thank you very much. Nice contribution. And I want to just quote for the sake of our listeners. Thank you, he says, for doing what you do. You made me notice that music is there. I have so much to learn, but I've been able to walk up to the front door of my journey, so to speak. That's really nice. That if I do nothing else, I hope to be able to do that, to give you more confidence about what you're doing and more clarity about maybe how to get there with a little bit of you know patient listening and conversing. Never forget you have to work this out. So I'm just going to start running through these quotes. So as you can see, I'm calling this a follow-up on the live presentation. And if I don't include you, if you get missed in some way from one of these, be sure to go ahead and bring me more questions. That's what I'm doing here, right? Or whatever commentary. These are very interesting questions, though. So how does compressing values relate to the visual order for you? There's actually a little further down a question from someone about values, so we'll pay attention when we get to that one as well. This is from Nick Majeski. How does compressing values relate to the visual order for you? Just this way, the idea of compressing values, that means you limit the length of the dark to the light, and the only reason I would know to do that is because I can't be effective in the range that nature has, or I can't even begin to approximate it. But the reason you see it sometimes, though, is because people are trying to produce something for the wall that would be in a shallow value range to start with. But the visual order has simply to do with the order of things given that range. So you accept that your dark is dark and light is light could be gray 7 and white, or it could be, or some other gray, some lighter gray. It could be anywhere in this range, all the way up from black to white, given what you have to work with on your palette. So if you know that, then all you have to say is they have to be right to each other. And that's what the visual order is. And you still should use the methodology of blurring your eye and putting it together in the order in which it's given to you, so that, those guys who come first are first, and you make sure that nobody gets past them. When you go up to do the next and the next levels, you make sure that you maintain the strength of those first effects. Do you feel that a painter paints with intuition, or should he be thinking each step? Yeah, actually, I don't think you actually have a choice. You have to do both. There's a certain amount of intuition, if you want to call it that. I think what Doctor was talking about, whether or not computers could do better work than better doctoring than doctors, And this doctor said, I believe that the human intuition is better than any machine will ever be. But if the human doesn't have the information, then the machine may outstrip him. So what we're really talking about is you need knowledge, and then you need, and by the way, that includes disciplines like what we do when, methodologies. So if you don't have that sort of fixed, and the names of things, and know how to work with what you have in front of you, but once you do, you have to be thinking each step. But your intuition is always involved in this, right? So And I say you could say your intuition leads, but your brain is always there consulting. Okay. So yeah, I think that through for yourself. That's one that really you have to do in action. You have to do in your own lives. And that was, did I say cruise? Yeah. And this is from Liz. And Liz, we did a question for you, and I think this is a follow up on that. You came back, and then someone else wanted to talk about something related to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this again, even though I may have maybe mostly covered it, but I I think I saw this one later. So sometimes I have trouble covering my canvas without losing the visual order on the larger works. It can take me almost a week sometimes just to cover the white without proper consideration. Now, if you're talking about something sitting in front of you, and nature's not changing, like if you're doing a flower, it's going to change on you, and that's not a good plan. You have to work fast in those situations, in a number of aspects of those. But we're talking about probably a typical still life that doesn't have dying flowers in it, but you have trouble covering your canvas without losing the visual order. Well, what else are you working from? How are you not always being comparative, and are you not always setting up with the strong players? And the visual order, the way I talk about it, isn't the proportions and all those things, and the majors to the minors in terms of all those elements we work with, but it is literally the order of things as they affect your eye, which is why you blur your eyes down just a ton. Okay. Blur your eyes down and work with those players and learn to situate them and work with them. I mean, so you work them in every way. Make them as like as you can, just in that element that you're going to be working in the abstract. And it's just its location and its effect. But if you work with your leading effect, you don't ever let anybody get past you. You don't ever go piecemeal. You always go back, no matter what you're working on. You go back and look at that and say, what is that to this? And then there's this whole series of them. Everything in the whole picture is related always. For example, to top and bottom, if you don't do your halves and quarters or whatever proportions you wind up with in a picture related to those fixed points, you're lost. You're just lost, right? And it's the same thing with the visual impression. If you don't know your strong players and haven't established, we call it an anchor, but it's called establishing them. Of course, it doesn't mean anything, but once you establish them, you've got to use them for that, okay? So just don't ever stop moving your eyes and watching to your anchors, okay? And that would be true of your most chromatic notes and all the other ones. And it doesn't mean that at some point in the picture you may find that you were wrong about that and you should have made it stronger yet. And then you just simply have to go and review everybody and make sure they're all following the plan set up by the new anchor. In color, it's not unusual to have missed a chroma, not to have gotten all the intensity you want, but you really go for broke when it comes to the greatest and most intense colors. And you see because that's the part where the paint will sort of betray us, where you can't really get the kinds of qualities sometimes that life has. But I'm making this too long. There should be nothing about the length of time. You still have your ability to blur your eyes, right? So you can see the visual order and you can say, if you look at your panel with a blurry eye and you look at it and you say, oh man, this is popping much more than nature does when I blur my eyes at that. This secondary, third piece. So if you continually do that, though, really you got to use what gives you the information. That is the blurring of the eye, and that's what visual order is. It's that coming out of the fog. And then Corey says, I agree. I got lost within my own painting. I get lost within my own painting sometimes and end up getting too impatient to cover the white. And I put the word restraint there, by the way. I want to make sure I didn't miss that, but it is one of the hallmarks of our way of painting. It's this idea of restraint. You have to know where you are and why you're there at all times. And you have to maintain your composure, shall we say? Just maintain your awareness about the relationships of things and that they're all hanging, So, and if you know it in our way, if you say, I'm going to put the color notes down first, make sure you have the restraint and stay with those until your color really is working nicely. Don't get eager to get into the effects, which is those edge relationships. And don't be eager to get into where they're located, which is the beginning of drawing, of drawing, at least in the spatial sense, in the placement sense. But their time will come, right? And one of the things that's really interesting about this is once you get those things going, for example, when you go and get a dark meeting a light and get the effect, get the look of nature at that spot, it'll actually improve your colors, which will send you back through, and you have to learn to have that kind of restraint to wander back through and see if that affects three other things that you might have been wrong about, that you might now see better because you've got that new level of information because of the joint you just made with the dark meeting a light, say. So Corey, thank you. This one from Bastith Creative. I'm having to learn on my own as well. It's really hard to know what to work on when you're still trying to discover what you want to get out of it. This one is going to be a part of that discussion. I'm going to create a special video for this about working on your own. But this is also a different point that I think is really worth isolating, which is the potentially a different point. And that is when you first look at nature, when you're painting a still life, and you don't know how to sit there and wait till you see what you've got, so you begin to know what to go for. But yeah, that we've done that a little bit, and I wish I could just automatically refer you to which video that is, but not so far back either. But I want to talk about that in a longer video, so if you'll forgive me for that, and if you don't mind, by the way, Bastith, if you want to get back to me via email or under this video here, just do so and fill out this question. Make it more clear what you really are looking for. Soraset says, color has always been a struggle till this day. I still do, and I assume you mean struggle with it, Soraset. Color shouldn't be a struggle, but there you have to be systematic. You have to be relational, or color will be permanently a struggle. You also have to know that color is made up of the value. If the values are wrong of a color, the color can't be right. And if the intensity is wrong of a color, it won't matter what the hue is. If the intensity is wrong, you'll just be frustrated as heck. So you have to make sure you do your comparisons both through the value range of all the values in the picture, the intensity range of all the values, as well as the color relations, which is pure hue. So, but I think you just want to get more organized and just, and again, if you pause there and just let yourself be a colorist for a while, just let yourself, don't stop having these ambitions on this picture. In fact, just paint some section of the room that you think is nice to look at, but you don't plan to make a painting out of it, and just start hitting notes, okay? And I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised that you can actually bring this about, that you'll find yourself working it through. It'll come over time to you anyway, if you care about color. But you can shorten this process. You can get there sooner. This first one, I think, Mr. Artistical, I still like your name. That's very funny. There's a certain rhythm to that. But I don't use photography. And doesn't mean I haven't ever used photography in some way, but it's not, I don't find any pleasure in it, and it dislocates you. You're not that person, It's like deciding you're going to write a limerick and all of a sudden turn it into a ballad. It's not what that is. So you might want to think about that. I may do one on this one specifically, this whole discussion of photography. And it goes with some of the other stuff about the new realism that happens in several other questions here, but I'm also going to try to ignore. Sorry, Jocko. For now, just for now. But I like this question. Would you classify Degas as an imaginative painter or as an impressionist painting what's in front of him? Yeah. I don't. Degas was always painting what was in front of him in the sense of drawing models, drawing stuff and things. But when it came to painting, I've never seen a painting by Degas. Even the portraits look like they're thought about more like Ang would have thought about putting the pieces together. But I think of Degas, and by the way, the ones that I think of are, I need to bring that to you sometime. I've discussed it before, maybe even showed a little section of the picture where you can see that he's got the visual order idea down. And so in that moment, he's got this thing happening. Oh, what pictures would I be thinking of? I'm thinking of a couple of these portraits of his friends. Maybe the portrait of Tissot, but I think I'd be wrong. So I probably shouldn't. Portrait of Durand Ruel, what was it? I forget who it was. Anyway, but there's a couple where you can see that he took a section and just handled it exactly the way a visual order impressionist would do. And so you could say there's a class sort of the sergeant look in that section. If you look around, you'll see what I mean. So he could do it, but that isn't what his pictures are. They appear to be more, and so all the dancers, all the ballet. I don't even see that when he in doing but there I wouldn't know. And the bathers, those could be setups. I'm still not convinced they are. But for sure, when you start talking about the dancers, I would say none of those are even beginning to be painted from life. How could they be? And they don't look as sort of dead as those kinds of live things. He actually brings a life to it. But he does so many drawings from life, so he's still taking his information directly from life. And then, as he says, he distanced himself a little bit by tracing them over and over again, and I think he's trying to reduce the amount of local information, the problem that realists have. and get down to what the essential information is. And so in that way, he's like an impressionist, sort of composing even the figure as he goes. But these things are then pieced together, like all the horse ones. They're all pieced together. That's too long an answer to that one. And I think we've talked about it somewhere. You might look that one up. I know we've talked about Degas, and I think I would have made that point somewhere in there. And this is from 0008, another one of my favorite names here. When you handles, I guess you call these. When you start, why do you use separate color spots? So I answered this question with bare canvas in between instead of starting off with a light effect. So I'm saying it because that's where I'm trying to create restraint in my brain. I really want to be there saying, give color its moment in the sun. And it just, by the way, there's another thing about that I really like about color, hitting color notes, and that is you don't come in tense. Color has this nice, you put it down with a blobby way, and color has a nice way of just getting you relaxedly into the paint, right? And that's one of the other reasons I do it, so just so you know. But the primary one is I really want to study the color scheme first and give it its priority. I'm going to prioritize it. And then immediately after that, and then he says, for example, why not start off a light effect, capture the value and color impression, and I assume you mean of that spot, and then extrapolate from there and cover the canvas. And we do that actually once we get past that. Then, for example, once I make an effect, I see what I can get rid of, not paint on, to cover the canvas. So I'm in this sort of a movement. Remember, I'm doing this in 2 hours or less or something like that, or maybe more. But so I'm in this mode where I need to move through. So there'll be the color and all that sort of stuff. And if you do good work and don't think about anything else, it won't take that long. Making the adjustments is always a lot of fun, a lot more fun than when you have you're stuck in a piece of drawing. But do all that research, searching out the color relations and finding the color scheme. It's one of the things I couldn't understand about even in the gamut world, where people are making decisions instead of letting decisions make themselves. That comes up in the question of keying a little later too. But so I do that. So I do that. The next part I then do that, and by the way, some of my students try it the other way as well, and they don't get the colors as well as they would. But we all mess with it, and I'm not going to tell you anything except that these are the elements, right? How you ultimately work for them, you're going to have to just try things and you'll see what delivers the best results over time and has the best flow, right? It has the best feeling of being a good craft-like, a workman-like process that flows, Do I believe in value first or color first? Well, I believe in color values, and I believe the value is the most important part of the color. So, but I oddly as I mentioned before, that I put in the values as the most important part of the color. So you see it's a red, you look down there and sort of that red. You put it down there and get the value right. Yeah, and you adjust the red. But I also do the intensity thing. I put the intensity factor higher. I must be making it too warm in my house. I'm having flies come after me in this cold country up here. So I believe absolutely the values are first, but I would never do a grisaille for this kind of work. And that's not what you mean either, but absolutely we agree on this one. I suspect you found that from just working. When I paint outdoors, it might look good in color in the shade, but when it comes inside, it doesn't. And that's where I say the word keying here, but what you're going to have to do, and nobody can give you tricks, but there may be some, but the biggest trick is to continually do this and then set your stuff inside and say, nope, that does not have what I saw out there. And let that be a lesson to you, It's like people are doing, when I say we're doing memory drawing, I remember when I was doing memory drawing, we were then going to trace the memory drawing we did and lay it over the photograph, right? And some people were actually working on tracing paper so they could just put it over the photograph. I never had to do that because I could see how stupidly wrong it was already. I didn't need to get smacked in the head. So, and I think it's something similar like that when you go out there when you come in with your colors, you see it's not working. You have a very good idea that when you get out there next time, there's going to be something different in the intensity or something, right? Or you're going to be a better painter relationally. So, yeah, I love these questions. You're definitely, obviously, working in the field. Norma, you're asking how do you maintain unity throughout the painting process, and of course you're talking about an impressionist, but everything to do with unity is, first of all, seeing the thing as a whole, and the second part of it is making sure you see relationally everything done in relation. But seeing the thing as a whole blurring down to make sure that the visual order has a unity factor in it, right? So if you blur your eyes and then just slowly open them, and you have only these 5 things and they're there, and the other ones are not there. Well, that's a version of that's a unity thing. The order has to be unified around nature itself. That's one of those things I see people saying this picture doesn't have enough unity, and all they mean is all the edges are different from each other. Well, if your nature's like that, so you got to get unity and have all the edges different from each other. But it's the unity of the impression in front of you and how that hangs together, which you have to sit there and gradually. Sometimes it comes over you gradually, and other times you can sit there and begin to understand it. Begin to, but get to that earlier. The earlier, the better to get into some. That's why you want to get some idea when you're looking at a picture. Get some idea because that's a unified thing in itself. It's unified. There's something about an idea. I mean, I'm talking about it when you look at things. Just look at it until you think, That's the minute the penny drops on the idea of what this is up to, and that's a unity thing. So I could say more on that one, but look at the couple of videos. I think we talk about unity a couple times in different videos. This one, Canvas Engineer, I don't know, and that was Norma. Yeah, did Sargent use thinner color outside of just his initial shadow lay-in? And I've never made that kind of a fine study of Sargent. So don't ask me. I'm the wrong guy to ask about that. But you should go look at canvases. And if I looked at canvas, I could tell you too. But we don't have one in front of us to look at. Sometimes, you'll find that all of us sometimes by chance or something, and I try not to do it by chance. I try to have the same quality of viscosity, et cetera, so that I'm doing the same thing all the time. So I'm not looking for all these things, but there are times you truly, by some accent or other, will get a certain effect. I get it more like because of a certain thinness. But I can't say I know the answer to that, Canvas Engineer. Jocelyn, this is the next question about values for whoever was into that question. About Corey, I think. I've learned to think of values, or Jack. Sorry, I've learned to think of values in major and minor keys. And actually, I don't understand what you mean, Jocelyn. And by the way, I see I misspelled. I added 2 L's to your name. So I've learned to think in values in major and minor keys. Well, if you think in terms of the values of the major masses, like I talk about Sargent, talking about the 3 values or 5 values, those are the major value masses. And then what happens within them is on its own. It's a product of what's in there. Gamble used to talk about. He used to say, it's a funny statement, and it has ways of being sort of right and wrong at the same time, but he used to say that the darkest darks and the lights are never as dark as the lightest lights in the dark. Okay. And that is one of those things you can say and not and sense that there's something about it that's just not quite true. And yet there's something about it that gets that idea across to you about maintaining how things are working in their areas. And so if that's what you mean by minor keys, major referring to the overall proportion of light to dark. So that proportion question is interesting, unless you mean masses, you mean the size of masses, but the major referring to the overall proportion of light to dark. So here's the darkest dark, here's the lightest light, and all these things are landing on numbers. Minor referring to the range of value contrast within the lights and dark. So that was the last part I was talking about. So I think we're saying the same thing. I'd love it if you'd follow up, though, like with an email or something. By the way, I did get that email from you today. Thank you about that Japanese was and I've lost it again. That is your handle and how it has to do with the struggle and some other things and quality of work or something like that. It was really a beautiful little handle to have. Nice choice. And then I looked up the meaning of Jocelyn, and it just means you're of the family of Jocelyn or something like that. Some from German into French. So I'd never found a meaning for that, your name. At what point do you consider the hierarchy of edges of the full picture once the value relationships are working? Or that's a question. And I think you may also, at what point do you consider the hierarchy of edges of the full picture? And the question is, and I think it's the follow-up, once the value relationships are working? So could be, but that's not probably what I mean. That was sort of the way Gamble seemed to work, that he would have us mass in stuff. And the edges, we wouldn't have done any considering of edges. And he would sort of imply that you could patch them up at some point. Well, the visual order requires you to have the edges right from the beginning. It just does, right? You can't get your effect without the sharpness. You can even know if your values are right where they meet if the edge isn't the right sharpness. And you can't tell if this unit of effect is right in relation to another one where this dark meeting this light has soft edges versus this one with its hard edge. So you can't even tell if they're the same dark and light. These are things you need to have in there. These are factors. So I've never found it since I woke up to that. I've never found that it was practical. It was way better, and that's one of the difficulties of understanding my way of working is knowing how much you actually have to be working on. Because once you realize all you have to be working on, that'll help you to be organized around this and not three. That's why you have to drop other kinds of ways of working, because you can't be organized around all those other things, anatomy and things like that. It just isn't going to work out. There's a level of complexity that it isn't going to work for you, given and different ways of thinking. Like when you're thinking analytically, when you're thinking out of your head, you won't be in the same place, and you can't be in two places at once in a painting. So that last comment I know deserves longer conversation. I've noticed in my own work that it can become piecemeal, likely because I'm focusing too much on form, and I struggle to lose information in my work. Well, feel free to be comforted by Tarbell saying at the end of the painting he's trying to see what he can get rid of. But it's something you're working on. I've noticed in my own work that it can become piecemeal. Now, a picture becomes piecemeal if you're focusing on form. That shouldn't happen. If you're focusing on the major, if you know the difference between major and minor forms, that shouldn't actually happen. But if you're painting across a head, doing every form as you go, that will happen. It's very difficult to do. If you're just talking about form, meaning roundness, right? But that would have to do with the size of things, and that you'd be chaos if you don't always be referring back to looking at them together, to referring to how they're talking to each other, and how, especially each of the little ones of forms, relates to the great form. So you see the various forms on a face, compared to this form. Now, this is somewhat in the class of what Jocelyn was talking about, though, with that idea that there are greater values, or major values, and there are minor values. And so there are major forms and there are minor forms. And you have to specialize. You have to major in the majors, don't major in the minors, as they say, okay? And you don't get there. People think you're going to get there by doing all these little things, and somehow or other the egg will come out. It won't come out the same way at all. And that one of the things that woke me up to a possible way of working on it was looking at Raphael. And you could see all the Perugino work before Raphael, and Perugino was his mentor and literally his model. They were just doing eggs for heads. And I never believed it. And I've mentioned the story to you before. I was walking down the street, girl watching from some distance as I was a young man. And I noticed these girls coming. And I didn't believe it, right? But I noticed these three girls walking toward me, some half block or more away. And I just saw the general effect. I was just looking at the general effect because my eyes aren't that good anyway. And I saw 3 eggs. Oh, beautiful eggs, too. I mean, really beautiful Perugino eggs. And that's a major form, comparatively, right? It's not as major as the whole chest to the head. That's different, though. This is big, and that's a small form. Or if you talk about the entire body as a one grand tube that has subtubes and all kinds of compartments of different kinds of forms, you understand the importance of getting your head around that. And I do suggest again there that you rather look at that nude demonstration I talk about. Yeah, but that's true. I agree with you, Cole. By the way, some of you guys, I think Cole, you said you're from around here, but some of you guys just come on over sometime and visit the studio. I'd welcome you. I see 3 or 4 of you guys from this area. And speaking of this area, Richard, I don't know if you meant for that to be Richard Luchet II, because you're not Richard II. We have a different guy for that. You might be Richard III if you're not careful. Anyway, Richard was a student of mine, a great manager of my studio for a bunch of years there when I first arrived in the Manchester area. And thank you very much for that, Richard. But so the question is, when are you going to come down, come see the Duveneck show at the Cincinnati Art Museum? It's up till the end of March. Well, when they don't have masks, when I have to put on a mask, I'll come down and see it. Okay? Can you just put the word out? Or else just rent the thing for a day, and we get permission to go without masks on, and I'll come down. Do I have an attitude? I didn't mean to have that showing, but I'm sure you'll do something with that, Richard. And don't offer me one of your masks. We have seen those. By the way, I do mention this because it's a good thing to talk about. Duveneck is one of those people who I think Sargent referred to as the greatest exponent of the brush or something. I forget what his term was, but of the Americans. Yeah, he's special. And I would love to be there. I'd love to see you guys again down in Cincinnati. When drawing from, so thank you. When drawing from memory and partly imagination, as Degas did, would it be possible to work with the visual order method? Well, being aware of it, working from it is not. Let me say it a different way. When Degas' drawing, he draws. He doesn't draw in the visual order, but he draws things. He orders things visually, so that the relationships of effects on a figure, for example, a drawing, those things are right to each other. He isn't just doing a schematic of some sort, just an outline with a couple of suggestions. You can sense the light and edges and things like that have been nicely related. That's one of the reasons I commend him as a top end draftsman. But all right, if I'm going to do a couple more, but I'm just checking my time because I'm running into already being. But no, I say that wrongly because I was an hour and a half on the big one, so I don't mean to go that long. I think there's a few more left. Yeah, the visual order method that I'm talking about is actually a process for evolving the look of nature in the grand phenomena, and he did it in figures, but I've never seen him actually do it because he doesn't set things down out there. I'm talking about an ensemble of stuff sitting in front of you. But you can look at some of his pictures that have a little bit of that look like they have a little bit of imagination, and maybe a certain higher level of impressionist observation of the whole. But I'm hard pressed to say I've seen one that I would say is doing that because I would have noticed it by now. But if it's possible, would it be possible? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And the idea of memory and partly imagination. Yeah, but I do see, if you look at Sargent, you have somebody working imaginative paintings that look like they were painted in the visual order. That, in other words, they literally look like they have the whole lost and found thing going on. Where Degas was very reluctant to lose line, for example. He called himself an impressionist with line. Isn't that interesting? Now, this is Jocko. And Jocko, I'm going to cover this first one, and then this will be the last one for you. But I'm going to pick you up again, okay? But I told my producer I try to stay in with the half-hour range, and that's what I was looking over there for. Practically speaking, can you, and by the way, I really appreciated your contributions and the fact that you kept it flowing. You had lots and lots of stuff. It was very nice to begin to see who you are and where you're coming from. It's helpful to me, for sure. But, and Jocko, by the way, if you're in this area too, I think you might be. I forget what you said, but don't hesitate to give a call and come by sometime. I'm in Lawrence, Mass. I'm not here now. I'm in northern New Hampshire. But practically speaking, can your method remediate classical realism and the photocopying new realism movement? And I think I did answer this one actually. Now that I read it again, but you had so many other questions I'd forgot which was which. But yes, it can remediate, but it can't remediate if that's not what you mean to be doing. In other words, you have to want what we've got. Impressionism is different from imaginative painting, which imaginative painting participates in making real things, real objects, real this, real that, and thinks of each object as separate. I'm thinking of that version of what Gamma like to call impressionism as being a different product. The impressionist mind doesn't know stuff and things, isn't trying to make a better. Mousetrap? It isn't trying to make a better head. He's trying to make a better visual impression. And that body of activity that you're involved in there, you have to get yourself over there and get to know that world. Rather be committed to separating yourself from all the other stuff before you can answer that question. But yes, the answer is a person can have both. You can work both ways. I suggest you can't work both ways, even begin to work both ways in both pictures, in one picture. That's that famous thing about trying to ride two horses at once or having your foot on two stools, and how precarious that is, having your feet on two different stools. So thank you all very much. It was a really successful thing that I think we did, and we saw a bunch of mistakes. Now we're trying to figure out what happened with the synchronization of the mouth. We have no idea. We had, at that point, no idea, and I hope that most of you weren't getting that. But you're very gracious in not mentioning it too much. One of you did say it, so I thank you for that. Whoever was coming in, it might have been you, Jocko. I forget who. Somebody was coming in and mentioned that, and I'm sorry about that it happened. But that's one of a number of things, including trying to get the questions to me without having to stare at a phone. My eyes aren't good enough to stare at the phone back here. I have to cover my face. It's not good. but we're working on all those things. So I'm interested in any of your feedback in general about what this meant to you, how we might do it better too. Okay, you've probably seen a bunch of these kinds of videos online. I haven't seen as much as you. I think I've seen one guy's work online where he's taking questions from the audience, and it's not a painter either, so that would be different. Um, so, all right. Well, with thanks to all of you for your wonderful donations over this period of time since we finally got that organized. Thank you for sharing. Thanks for subscribing, getting us up to this nice number. And I look forward to doing this again. We're talking about maybe doing it, once we get up to maybe 23 or 2,500 subscribers, to doing it again. And this time, the only thing I think I would really do differently for sure for myself is just start with your questions and just have those pictures on the back burner, not start with any of that stuff, because all you guys seem to know what I'm talking about right from the beginning, and of course you would. So I would rather get right into your conversation and then have images, which I have here. I have like 30 or 40 images, all of which direct themselves toward our methodologies. So, all right. Anyway, it was fun. This had my producer on edge, but we managed to get through, and he's pretty pleased with the product initially, and so we'll try it again, and see you next time. Hope you have a great working few days, and yeah, call it a night.